Hey everyone, welcome back to Today in Tech. I'm Juliette Beauchamp and I'm here with Computer World Executive Editor Ken Mingus, as well as Macworld Executive Editor Michael Simon. We are live on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so if you have any questions or comments while we're discussing, please do leave them either in the comments if you're over on LinkedIn or in the live chat if you are on YouTube. So, topic of the day. Last week, the Washington Post published this article that was titled, and I might be paraphrasing the title a little bit, but when your iPhone asks you, when you tell your iPhone and tell an app on your iPhone not to track, they can still continue to snoop in the background. That's more or less the headline. And this really opened a pretty big can of worms about Apple privacy, iPhone privacy, and how it perhaps is like, it doesn't necessarily meet user expectations. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, sort of what this means for user privacy, as well as Android's response. But just to sort of introduce the topic a little bit, Ken, could I throw it to you? There's a great article on Computer World that I will plug in the live chat if anyone wants to check out.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, Apple has not had a good month or so in terms of privacy issues between this Washington Post story and then the earlier controversy around it scanning, users' photos for child pornography, things like that. The latest brouhaha, Evan Schuman had a column on Computer World this week about this, which is, sort of why we're talking about it, among other reasons, because all right, background. Washington Post did a story last week that, when users of iOS tell apps not to track them, the apps are still gathering a lot of information and sending it back to somewhere. We're not quite sure where it goes or how it's being used, but it's almost like being able to fingerprint user devices based on things like IP address, what type of phone, what version of the operating system, when was it last restarted, any details around like accessibility changes that the user might have done. And so it raises the question that, Apple's made a big deal about app tracking transparency and the idea that, users can tell apps, don't track me, which gives a lot of users, maybe a false sense of security that these apps are not tracking what they're doing, across other apps and with their devices. And of course, it raises an obvious enterprise question because there are a lot of iPhones being used, in corporate environments, either BYOD or companies have bought them and distributed them or whatever. And obviously, companies have a big stake in trying to make sure that, data stays secure and that what their users are doing is safe. And it just kind of flies in the face of the image that Apple has been portraying. I should say that one of the things the Washington Post did was reach out to Apple and said, what's going on? And Apple says, oh, well, those app developers shouldn't be doing that. We'll work with them to make sure they are. But then the Post waited a while and nothing seemed to have changed. And so it's like, we're kind of in a gray area here where there's been an issue that has been identified. Apple's aware of it. But as best we can tell, nothing has happened, nothing's changed. And this is something, it's not just iOS 15, which is the new version. It was also iOS 14.8. So it's been around for a while. I guess the bottom line is when you think you're telling an app not to track you, don't be so sure.
Right. And if I'll also link the Washington Post article as well in the live chat. But there's exactly what you said, Ken. A lot of this data flows through apps to sort of like third-party data aggregators, I guess. And all of this information, even though even if you just have one piece of information about your phone, it's certainly not enough to identify your specific device. And it's not confirmed that all of this information is actually being used to fingerprint. But when you take all of this data together, it really can paint a very specific and unique picture of your device and therefore the user. So that's really what the data privacy issue is. And in Evan's column, he does talk a little bit about what Android's doing. And I know Android announced in Android 11 that it introduced this concept of apps that you haven't been using for a few months. After a few months of non-usage, the runtime permissions reset. So that basically means that if you granted them permissions to whatever, they don't have them for, until the end of time. If it's not an app that you use often. So even though that wasn't necessarily Android's answer to Apple, it's two different ways of app privacy. So
Yeah.
that's
Well,
sort of
and,
what
you
we're
know,
looking at the landscape.
Google has also been hit over the years for, privacy concerns. And I think this was a response to those, that earlier criticism that Android also was, leaking a lot of data about its users. And so, yeah, what Google did is with Android 11 has said basically, if you've got a bunch of apps on your device that you haven't used in a long time, it resets those app permissions so that if they're in the background, not being used, but still scarfing up data about the device, basically Android will turn that off. And so that's not going to do a whole lot with apps that are current that you're using all the time that may still be snooping, but at least it's a start. It's something that Google can point to as a tactic it's taken.
Sure. So we can talk now a little bit about, I guess, sort of Apple's response to this. Like you mentioned, Ken, it's definitely, it hasn't necessarily had some favorable privacy coverage lately between this and then also the Pegasus spyware that they super quickly pushed out a patch for that sort of gained traction once the new update came out. So I guess we can talk about a little bit about, Apple's response to these privacy matters. And I guess also what certainly the public, statement response, but then also what sort of actions are going to come of it. I mean, if Apple's saying that this is in the hands of the app makers, it doesn't necessarily give Apple a lot. They're certainly not taking the blame in this specific circumstance, it seems.
Hey, just real quick, Julia.
Yes.
You said they pushed out a patch for the CSAM. They never actually rolled out
the Pegasus spyware.
Oh, yeah. That was
Yeah,
right.
It's interesting about CSAM, though. The thing about it is they announced that they were not going to roll it out on the Friday before Labor Day weekend. I mean, if you're going to try to bury some news, that's when you want to do it. So I don't think Apple was exactly thrilled with the way this whole thing emerged. And then the fact that there was such a controversy about it that they needed to pull it back and say, well, we're going to kind of look at this a little bit longer and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, I agree. I think they got a bit of a bad rap with that. I mean, I think their intentions were in the right place. As we've discussed on this show before, other companies, like all of them, do similar things.
Right.
And Apple was going out of its way to make sure that it was as private as it could be by matching hashes on your phone, and that's where it ran into trouble. It was more of the messaging. It rolled out kind of hastily. The idea that they were doing this rolled out hastily because it got leaked, and Apple wanted to get in front of that leak. Which when something leaks, there's the tendency for it to be tied to misinformation, and I think Apple wanted to get ahead of that, so they pushed out their explanation of it a little hastily. Then a couple of days later added a FAQ, and then a couple of days later after that added more information, and it all kind of came out in dribs and drabs, and there was no real unified message to say, hey, okay, this is what we're doing in real simple terms. But if you dive into what the technology is, there's not a lot of reason for outrage. It's tied to iCloud Photos. Yes, it's on your device, but it's very specific, and there are flags. Maybe other governments could say, hey, we want you to use it for this, but right now it's a US only thing. It's not even in like the UK or anywhere in Europe. So it's possible that it stays there. Apple hasn't said we're going to roll it out in, February of next year or whatever it is. So I do think with all of these privacy features and technologies that Apple builds into their products and their OSs, they take a lot of care to make sure that the user is, front and center. That said, they're a business, and these things, they have to worry about, developers and the people that they work with. As far as the app tracking transparency issue, I'm not schooled enough in it. I've read it a lot. We were going to actually talk about this last week, and we didn't because neither of us really knew, what the report had just came out. But I'm still not 100% sure what the Washington Post is hitting on. Okay, for one, app tracking transparency isn't about the app you're using. It's about other apps. The dialog box specifically says, allow this app to track your activity across other companies' apps and websites. Now, so that means, let's say you're using Facebook, and Facebook wasn't included in this story, I don't believe, but we'll use them because they're the biggest. Anything you do on Facebook is perfectly valid for Facebook to take, the developers to take your information within that app. What app tracking transparency stops is, linking to like other apps that they use without giving explicit permission to gather the data and contacts and things for other apps. But within the app you're using, that's part of that. So the idea that you hit that little button and it shuts down all transmission to developers, I don't necessarily think that's happening. Maybe people do. I think we lost Ken.
That's okay. He'll come back.
Okay. I think that, people might believe that, okay, I'm asking this app not to track, and that it covers all of the things that I do within this app, and that it'll never see what I'm doing. But that's not exactly the case. Developers, they gather information, and that's a business model for a lot of these companies. It's not necessarily nefarious. In a lot of cases, it's not. Yes, they build profiles of us, and yes, they use it for ads. And that's what Apple's trying to stop, is basically the permission there. So they're before iOS 14.5, unless you went into the settings and hit the button and turned it off, apps were able to kind of build these profiles and say, okay, here's an ad company. We know that this person likes this, that, and the other thing, and you can target them with these products.
Right.
Now, is it annoying? Yeah. Is it nefarious? Is it something that they're using to hack into our phones and bring down our devices? No. It's a nuisance at best. And what Apple's thing does is it shuts down the ability for companies to do that without our permission, our explicit permission.
I think the crux of it, and I think this is certainly just my personal takeaway from the Washington Post article, is I think the point that they were trying to make is that I think it just doesn't necessarily meet user expectation, even if it's well within the fine print. I think it's something that if you're an everyday user of your iPhone and you're not like a super, and and you are saying, oh, okay, I don't want an app to track me, but you're not necessarily, a tech journalist. And I think it's just not meeting your expectation necessarily. And perhaps you may feel like sort of duped by this.
I mean, maybe, but you're also sharing everything that you have on the internet.
Sure.
Well,
and
I do find the irony of being concerned about privacy while posting everything you do and place you go on Facebook. I
Fair
do
enough.
get the irony there. But I think it's just about the perception. It's the idea that, now I may have missed this. My computer burped and I had to restart. But did you guys talk about the things that Apple has rolled into iOS 15, like private relay and, you're hiding your email address and things
no,
like
but
that?
that's all.
Because I do want to, note that Apple is taking other steps to protect privacy beyond.
Just to be fair, you do have to pay for that stuff, but yeah. It is there, and they're great features.
Part of iCloud.
They have a pseudo VPN built into Safari. They have a hide my email thing where you can shut down, like if you buy something or subscribe to a newsletter or something, like they won't get your personal email. They'll be sent to a string of numbers at apple.com, and they'll forward that to you. So the company actually, they don't get your credentials. That's the same thing with sign in with Apple.
That I use often, and it is wonderful.
Yeah. And, this boils down, this drops down to even like their credit card. It's all randomly generated numbers. Like you do have a number, but when you buy something on, using your iPhone, the company doesn't get your credit card number. They get a randomly generated string of numbers. So like I said before, Apple, it's not BS. It's not a marketing ploy. Like they do care about privacy. They do pride themselves on being the company that's at the forefront of this stuff. that said, the iPhone is a multi-billion dollar business, and companies need, Facebook has already said, hey, this is affecting us.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a way around it. People are going to figure out, okay, well, listen, we have to make money. This is the way we make money. How are we going to do this? Because people aren't going to stop using iPhones. So we have to figure out a way to circumvent that without breaking Apple's rules. And then Apple will say, okay, you're doing that, then we're going to stop this. It's they're going to continue to figure out ways to do it, and Apple will continue to figure out ways to stop it.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it's going to be. Fingerprinting sounds like a real scary, deep web hacker word, but it's not. They're getting the same information that they were before in a different way.
Well, exactly. I think that the whole app tracking thing, what did it shut off access to ID for advertising, IDFA or something like that, which
for cross promotion of that. But within the app that you're using, that's not what you're shutting down. So, I don't know the specifics of what the post was looking at, but it didn't that button, that do not track button didn't magically shut down all tracking for everything on your phone. You're still using an internet connected device to share information all over the world.
Yeah, well, but I think to the original point that Juliet was making is that Apple, by being so pro-privacy and so vocal about it, raised the bar for itself.
Sure.
And that, the expectation here doesn't match, what's really going on. And I think that's the thing. But now Apple's been very successful in pushing itself as the privacy, tech firm. And I think rightfully so. I agree with you. It does care about privacy. The point that Evan was making in the Computer World piece was that what this means is Apple really needs to be vetting these apps even more closely than it might be to see what they're doing.
Maybe so, and that's been an issue since the App Store first came out. I mean, they have people that look at these things, and we always see like my app got rejected for no reason, or this app got through because someone missed it. I mean, it's impossible to check it all. And articles like that will keep Apple on their toes and will keep them looking at things. I mean, I remember a few years ago that Facebook profile they were using. Remember, they denied Facebook the developer account or something because they were using profiles to track people. There's always a way. There's always a way.
Yeah.
And Apple can't, not to excuse them. I mean, it's their company and their fault. But it's impossible when you have millions of apps and billions of users to keep track of all of it at once. And they're throwing up these walls and safeguards and blockades and obstacles and hurdles and everything else, but there's the people who are still going to find a way to get through. And as I was saying before, it's not all nefarious. It might seem that way, but mostly companies just want to make money.
Yeah, they want to make money by being able to target users,
right?
Ads, et cetera, et cetera. It's the age-old story. I guess we're never going to win this race. You're never going to be able to do everything, because you're right. We are all now connected and interconnected. And I just think that the issue here is more about the gray areas, because like I say, in the Washington Post piece, they reached out to some of these companies that this data was being sent back to, and even some of the app developers and the game apps to say, okay, what are you doing with this? And the answers they got back didn't really answer the question. And so I think it's the lack of information, about why you need to know the storage on my iPhone and how much of it is used and whether I've turned on increased contrast and things like that. I mean, obviously you're building a profile of that particular user, even if you don't know the specific user's name or address. And so when that profile drifts across into different apps or online, the advertisers know, oh, okay, this is that person. Let's shoot this kind of ad at them.
Right. If I could just chime in really quickly, we do have one viewer, I guess, comment about the newer privacy features that Apple rolled out with iCloud Plus and Private Relay. This one viewer said that Private Relay is still in beta.
That's correct.
So I guess, could we go over briefly what exactly it is?
You can turn it on if you want.
Okay.
But it works. It's there. in iOS 15, you'll get a little message that pops up that explains
Yeah.
the new, if you subscribe to
Right.
iCloud, which is any any tier. So even if
Okay.
you pay for 99-cent
Yeah, you
storage,
just don't get it with the free tier. That's the only thing
Right.
you don't get.
It's
The
just
basic
which-
5 gig thing.
Mhm.
which I wonder if how many people are on anywhere at this day and age, because you only get 5 gigs, which is ridiculous. But any tier iCloud, including the Apple One bundles, you'll be able to get this. So it includes iCloud Private Relay, which is, hold on, I'm going to get
It's
the
sort of like a
exact-
built-in VPN, isn't it?
kind of, but not really. So it will hide your IP address from the places that you go to,
Mhm.
but you have to use Safari. That's the biggest caveat there.
Mhm.
So if you have iCloud Private Replay and Relay and you use Chrome, it doesn't do anything. So that's the one, and it's also not like you can't use other VPN features, like I don't know, watching Netflix in Britain or something like that.
Sure.
Like there are ways that VPNs work to do things where it kind of like masks your location.
Right.
That's not what's going on here. It's strictly blocking your IP address so people can't get it
It's like an
when using Safari.
anonymizer. It's like an
Mhm.
Kind of.
anonymizer, so
Right.
that
within
sites,
Safari, right?
yeah, within Safari, sites that you're calling up in Safari don't have your IP address. It's on. It's like it's sort of hidden going out and then hidden on the other end, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very simple, basic type of VPN that, it's cool that they're offering it. It's cool that they didn't charge $10 a month for it. But if you're looking for a VPN for your iPhone, there are other options that are, will do what you want to do.
Mhm.
This is strictly for like that one specific purpose. But again, it's a great privacy feature. If you use Safari, I mean, turn it on. It's not gonna affect your experience, and there's only a benefit to it. There's no real detriment. It's not like, well, if you turn it on, you're gonna get slower speeds or you can't visit these websites. No, it's the same thing. You won't even know it's on.
Yeah.
It's just that your IP address won't be sent anywhere.
Sure. So I guess just as we're wrapping up here, is there a response, do you think? Is there change that's going to happen either on the iOS front or similarly, since we were talking a little bit about Android too, is Google going to look at this and be like, oh gosh, maybe we should build in more privacy features?
Google will do what it has to do and nothing more.
Collect every bit of data it can.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
make
it's not.
money
That's
off
not
of
a.
it.
That's not a dig against Android per se. I mean, that's their business.
It's their business model.
Yeah,
of
it's
course.
funny
Mhm.
because they have, on one hand, they have an OS that's supposed to be, secure and private. On the other hand, they're an advertising business. So like the two things are in direct opposition to each other. They are introducing in Android 12 a feature. So if you opt out of ad personalization, I think it's called, Google will no longer send the ad identifier to developers. You'll
Mhm.
get like a string of zeros or a randomized number.
Okay.
But you need to find it and opt out. Whereas Apple pops it up on your screen and it's an opt-in. It's a different way of looking at it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the option is there on Android phones, and Apple's making Google's making it stronger on Android 12. 90% of people don't even know it's there. The rest, out of the 10 that do, 5% turn it on. It's a small portion. And
Well,
I don't know how many people even really know or care that this is going on. Like, I think people like targeted ads.
well, that's what I was just going to say. The thing about it is,
I don't
if
think
you're
they
going to
dislike
be
it.
served up ads anyway,
You might as
you
well be
know,
ones you want.
then you might as well be. They might as well be ads for things that I might actually like to know more about. That is the advertiser's arguments, and I think there's some truth to that. I don't really want ads for like Pampers, or. I don't know, something that I don't care about, or
Mhm.
that's not part of my lifestyle, as it were. And so I get it, but you make a really good point, Michael, which is that Apple pops it out in front of you and allows you to opt in if you want the personalized ads. and Android buries it, makes it,
Well, I mean, Apple
available.
buried it before iOS 14.5 too, to be fair. You know,
Yeah.
honestly, anything in settings is buried. People don't go look into their settings to find tackles other than the people who
I
write
do.
this
I
stuff.
love to
Yeah,
go through
but
the
we
settings
have
and,
to. That's our job.
click through everything on
But
and off.
most people aren't.
I know. Yeah.
Like I remember a couple years ago, I was talking to a friend and she was, tapping her phone trying to get to edit a email. And I held my finger to bring up the magnifying glass, and she was like, "What is that?" Like we don't realize how little people really know about their phones.
Yeah.
Like it makes calls, it can get on the web. A couple of games I play, and I can take photos. Like that's the extent of what the vast majority of people, maybe
90%,
use smartphones. That's what they care about. And once these things, so that dialog box that pops up, if you don't understand what was happening before,
Right.
well, I don't want to be tracked, so you're going to click it.
Yeah, of course.
Android's not doing that. Android's not doing it. They would lose. Google would lose. I don't know how much of their business. I mean, lots, because that's what they need. And again, I'm not saying that Google's a bad guy here. It's just that's their business model.
It's their business.
Yeah.
Julia, to your larger point about where this all goes,
Yeah.
Even the Washington Post story said it's an arms race. It's like cops and robbers. There'll always be, some effort to, boost privacy in some way around it. I think the bottom line is people should just be aware that privacy is not guaranteed. Steps that you think you're taking to protect your privacy will probably help on the margins, but it's there's no one size fits all cure all for this stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, and also not to excuse Apple from any of this, but they're whenever they're slow to respond to something, we tend to drag them. And most recently, there was somebody, a security researcher, reported that he had sent Apple months ago. Like we have these vulnerabilities.
In April, I think.
Yeah, April or June or something. Yeah, maybe right. It was months ago. Hey, we found all these vulnerabilities in iOS 15, and you should really address them. And he heard nothing back for months. So then there's an honor code of 90 days once you report it to the company, then you can go public. So he did, and then Apple responded. It's hey, can you we're going to fix these things. That sounds bad when you read about it in a story all at once. What are they doing? Why aren't they addressing these things? But they're a gigantic company. Gigantic. They probably get 50,000 bug requests a month, or bug reports a month, maybe more. It's a daunting task. If we were to ever to see how they, what they say, how the sausage is made, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
Our heads would spin. How much Apple has to deal with on an hourly, daily, monthly, annual basis, and still release updates to every single one of their OSs and products, and keep all their customers happy, and repair stuff and all these other things. And again, I'm not excusing them. They're the biggest company in the world. They're the richest company in the world, and they deserve to be held accountable for every bit of it. But the demands that people have and the press has, and I count myself among most of those, are sometimes a little bit over the pale of what.
People like to stick it to Apple because Apple is so
Yeah.
successful at what it does. I get that. Yeah. And, any company is going to fall short at times. I agree. Apple, I think, is trying and likes to toot its horn on privacy, has raised the bar, and therefore will be measured by a higher bar.
Of course. And right. They painted their image of themselves over the last 20, 30 years, and they should be held to that image in public. Absolutely. But, when the Washington Post writes a story like this and then says, "Hey, well, Apple didn't do anything about it," it's
Not yet.
Yeah, it takes time to do that, and the wheels move very slow for all this stuff.
Sure.
Again, not excusing Apple, they should be held to the fire, and all of these things should come out, and whistleblowers should come forward with this stuff, all of that, because they're the biggest company in the world, because there's billions of Apple products in the world. So for all intents and purposes, they're bigger than, the Defense Department. So they should absolutely be held accountable. But our expectations sometimes are just they're a little bit too high.
All right. So I'm sure if anything else comes of this, we will be talking about it. But in the meantime, thank you both so much for calling in and chatting with me. Obviously, consumer privacy, both a very important and also, to me, certainly interesting topic. So I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much for watching this episode of Today in Tech. If you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you're watching over on LinkedIn, you can head over to our YouTube channel, IDG Tech Talk. You can subscribe there and hit the bell icon so you're notified every single time we post a new video. Next week, we also, in addition to chatting with Mike and Ken, we're also going to be talking about Windows 11 later within the show. So if you have any questions about Windows 11, obviously it hasn't rolled out yet, but if you can think of anything, if you're watching this after it's rolled out, we'll be talking about it in just a few days. So please do leave your comments below. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.